So hello everybody. I was expecting that I might be able to see some of you, so it's a little bit strange talking to myself on the screen because that's what I'm seeing. But hello, I know you're out there, and I saw that there's people coming in from Europe. There's people also coming in from New York City, did I see? And I'm based in Dubai in the Middle East. So as you saw, my name's Carol Talbot. I'm not going to do too much of an intro because when you signed up, you probably saw my profile. So being in the Middle East, you may have heard of a book called The Arabian Nights Tales. And in that book, there's the story of a poor boy called Aladdin. And Aladdin comes across a magic lamp. And when he rubs the lamp, a genie appears and grants all his wishes. Now, of course, the story is pure fiction. Or is it? Because tonight, or this morning, or this afternoon, wherever you are in the world, today anyway, I want to introduce you to your own genie, your own genius that lives inside of you. So 2 quick things before we start. I'd like you to make sure that you're sitting up nice and straight and comfortable wherever you are, because your physiology makes a big difference to how you feel. It affects your state. And the second thing I'd like you to do is smile. Now, when you smile at somebody, what's the natural reaction? When you smile at somebody else, they automatically smile back, right? And if somebody smiles at you, you automatically smile back if you're not wearing a mask. So why have I told you that? Because just imagine 100 billion cells or neurons constantly wiring and firing inside your head. And what this means is each time you repeat the same thought, operate from the same behavior, run from the same emotions, use the same words, it strengthens the way those neurons wire and fire together. Particularly smile back. That's because you're hardwired that way. Your neurons are wiring and firing that way. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about why that's so important a little bit later on in this presentation. The second thing that I want to share with you about a smile is when you smile, it actually tells your brain that something good is about to happen. And I certainly hope that's the case with this presentation. Now, an enormous amount of intelligence is going on inside each and every one of you. So for example, if I were to take a bite of this apple, then saliva and digestive juices would be released. And my body has the intelligence to know what to absorb, what nutrients to absorb from that apple and what to discard. That's intelligence. So you have a brain inside your head. You also have a brain inside your heart. Now, of course, it doesn't look anything like the brain in your head. It wouldn't fit. But in 1994, it was discovered that the heart has certain types of cells that mean it can be classified as intelligent. Not only that, if you go back to, say, ancient Egypt in the mummification process, they used to discard the brain as worthless, yet they always made sure that the body was intact with the heart. They revered the heart. And the electromagnetic field that emits from the heart far exceeds the electromagnetic field that emits from the brain. And again, I'll be bringing that information back in a little bit later and why it's so important. So you have the brain in your head, you have the brain in your heart. There's also gut intelligence. So if you've eaten something that's a little bit off, then your stomach's going to grumble and growl and tell you about it, tell you something's off. And there's also cell intelligence. Even a single cell has the ability to make decisions in unforeseen challenges. Not only that, your cells hold the blueprint for who you are, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So that means that each time you learn something new, your cells are constantly being updated. Now, all this intelligence is happening inside of you and happening inside one person. Now, just for a moment, multiply that by the number of people maybe in the organization that you work with, or your company, or the people that you surround yourself with on a regular basis. That means there could be hundreds of brains, billions and billions of neurological connections, wiring and firing in different directions in a potential spiral downwards in chaos. The question is, how are you going to harness all that potential so it's aligned with your mission, your vision, or your business? And tonight, if I could show you a way to harness all that potential, would that be useful? Would that be valuable? Because you are a catalyst. You have the ability to rewire your brain in such a way that not only can you make massive shifts for yourself, you can also make massive shifts for other people. So let me just share the screen up here and share with you the 4 points, the 4 areas that I want to cover, 4 consecutive steps that will allow you to create this shift in a way that may seem impossible at first and is actually very simple. So the first thing is discovering what lies beneath the hard drive of you and your organization, and then redefining the triggers for you and your brand, remembering that you are also a brand. And then how we can harness chaotic energy to finally ignite a morphogenetic field and create that spiral effect that leads to infinite expansion. So that's a sort of heads up of where we're heading, the steps I'm going to take you through. So let's start at the beginning by discovering what lies beneath the hard drive of you. And here we are going deeper into the 21st century, and in these unprecedented times, massive shifts in this global awakening and the global reset. So we're already facing a lot of change. How do most people respond to change? Particularly when you think that change is a given. And what I see is most people, when they're faced with change, it's kind of like thanks and no thanks. So what do you think creates this resistance to change? What do you think is the biggest barrier to change? Now, when I ask that question, people often say fear, that can be a big barrier, or wanting to stay in your comfort zone, lack of information or lack of knowledge, fear of stepping into the unknown. And all those contribute to this resistance to change. Yet they're not the biggest barrier to change. So you may be surprised to know that the biggest barrier to change is actually your very own conscious mind. And the reason I say that is your conscious mind is responsible and hardwired to judging, criticizing, and analyzing everything that's going on. From what I'm saying, what I'm wearing, from what your competitors are doing. It's reactive and it's judgmental. Now, just for a moment, consider your conscious mind like a computer screen and a keyboard. So you're watching on a screen right now, so you respond and react to what's going on the screen. And with a keyboard, you can also type in information and it appears on the screen. However, nothing appears on the screen if your screen is not connected and your keyboard is not connected to a hard drive. Now, your unconscious mind is basically like a hard drive, and it's essentially a recording and playback device that forms the habit mind. It forms the habit mind, and they estimate that it's about thousands of times more powerful than the conscious mind. And what this means is you are operating from programs and patterns stored on your hard drive at the unconscious level of your mind and reacting and responding according to those patterns 95% of the time. 95% of the time. Wow. So, other things that you need to know about the unconscious mind, and by the way, just a little caveat here. Some people refer to the unconscious mind as the subconscious mind. They're the same, except the term that I like to use is the unconscious mind. So I just wanted to clarify that for you. Now, your unconscious mind is also responsible for all learning, all behavior, and all change. All the domain of the unconscious mind. So let's look at learning first. How does that work? Well, if I were to ask you to shout out your mobile telephone number, you could probably do that instantly. Yet just for a moment, consider, where was that information before I asked you for it? It was stored at the unconscious level, and I asked you to bring it back into your conscious awareness. So all learning is stored at the unconscious level, and it may go through the conscious awareness first. So say in a hypnosis session, the purpose of hypnosis is to partially suspend the conscious mind so you can communicate directly with the unconscious mind. So all learning stored at the unconscious level. So let's look at behavior, which is also the domain of the unconscious mind. How does that work? Well, if I were to lift my arm, I don't know how many muscles, tendons, fibers, bones there are from my shoulder all the way down to my fingertips. And could you imagine if I had to consciously communicate to every muscle, fiber, bone, piece of skin? It would probably take all day to lift my arm, which wouldn't make for a very interesting or exciting presentation. So think about if wherever you are in the world, if you're having a drink or you've just eaten, who's digesting that liquid that's just gone in you? Who's digesting that food? Are you sitting there going, oh? Probably not. Your unconscious mind gets on with all of that digestion for you. And when it comes to beating your heart, can you imagine if we had to consciously beat our heart? It would probably go something along the lines of, whoops, forgot, dead. So your unconscious mind does all that for you, and it's good that it does. And your unconscious mind is also responsible for all change. Now, I don't know if any of you have had the experience where you've gone to maybe a personal development program or a seminar or a training, and it was really, really good, and you felt that you made loads of changes during that program. Yet when you went back home or you went back to the workplace, very quickly, everything went back to normal. And maybe some of you are experiencing that, having gone and set yourself maybe New Year resolutions. How are those going so far? So the question here is, why is it so difficult to change? I'm going to let you into a little secret here. The now that you're experiencing right now actually registered at the unconscious level at least half a second ago, maybe longer. I'm going to say that again because it's important. The now that you're experiencing right now actually registered at the unconscious level at least half a second ago. Now, this isn't something that I just made up. It actually came about through 15 years of research by a neuroscientist called Benjamin Liebe. Why is it important to you? Let me give you an example. Have you ever been driving along and been cut up in traffic, and you got angry, you got stressed, you cursed the driver, you got into a real state. And after you calmed down, maybe you said to yourself, you know, the next time that happens, I'm just going to let that wash over me. I'm not going to get stressed about it. I'm just going to let it be. So that's what you tell yourself consciously. 20 minutes later, another car cuts you up in traffic, and immediately you get angry, you get upset, you start cursing the driver, you get anxious. How come when you told yourself that you were going to change your behavior, that you were going to stay calm? Well, this is because the information hits the unconscious level and you respond and react based on the programs and patterns that you've got stored at the unconscious level. Programs and patterns that may have been installed when you were a child. Are the programs and patterns that you're operating from helping you or hindering you? Are they up to date? Because behavioral psychologists estimate that we only act from conscious awareness about 5% of the time. And by the way, they say that's for people like us here on this program, who are probably a little bit more consciously aware of ourselves. Whereas for the majority of people out there, they say that they're operating from conscious awareness less than 1% of the time. So what this means is, even when you consciously think you're making a decision, that decision that you're making is actually based on past decisions and programs and patterns that are already stored at the unconscious level. So when I work with individuals and when I work with organizations, one of the first things we do is start to recognize the programs and patterns that they're operating from. And as I said, whether those programs and patterns are helping and moving them forward or moving them in the other direction. Now, how can you start to identify some of those programs and patterns? Well, one of the ways is noticing what triggers you. And this comes down to the second point, redefining the triggers for you and your brand. So we are creatures of patterns and habits. And it's our patterns in thinking and behavior that create our response to circumstances and not the circumstances themselves. So let me ask you, how many of you here listening in woke up with an alarm clock? Or maybe I should say an alarm sound from your mobile phone. I think alarm clocks are a little bit dated. But how many of you used an alarm to wake up this morning? Now, the alarm on maybe your device is the trigger. What's the conditioned response? Leap out of bed and greet the day? Or do you hit the snooze button and grab another 5? What about when you go out driving? When you come across a red traffic light, the red traffic light is a trigger. What's the conditioned response? The conditioned response when it's red is to stop, right? And when the traffic light goes to green, it's like go, go, go. And what about in an organization, in your business? When somebody calls a meeting, that's a trigger. What's the conditioned response? Amazing! Another meeting, an opportunity to share my creative ideas. Or is it, oh no, not another meeting? You know, I always think there's a reason that they're called board meetings. And here's the other thing. You yourself are also a trigger that elicits a specific response in other people. So when people hear your name, when they see you or hear your voice, that's a trigger. What response, what conditioned response does it elicit in other people? Is it, oh yes, wonderful? Or is it, oh no? And more importantly, what response would you like to trigger in other people? Now, of course, conditioned response is not new. In fact, a lot of intelligent marketing is based on conditioned response. And if you look at specific brands, they also bring in certain celebrities to endorse their brands. Why? So the two are equated as being the same. Now, as I said, conditioned response, I'm just going to put up the slides again. Conditioned response is nothing new. It dates back to the early 1900s. In the 1930s, there was a psychologist called Ivan Pavlov. And many of you may have heard of his famous experiment with dogs. If you haven't, what he did was he took a group of dogs, and when they were hungry, he'd show them a big, fat, juicy steak such that they'd start salivating and then he'd ring a bell at the same time. Now, he did this again and again and again. Every time the dogs were hungry, he'd show them a big, fat, juicy steak. They'd salivate, he'd ring the bell. Until he did it so often that he could ring the bell and the dogs would start salivating, even though there was no meat there. How come? Because the dogs equated the meat and the bell as creating the same response. They elicited the response of salivating. And it took behavioral psychologists all that time to realize that as human beings, we too are lean, mean, conditioned machines. We are subject to conditioned response. We respond to certain triggers. And some triggers that are pushed are good and some are not so good. So with that in mind, is it possible to teach an old dog new tricks? Can you rewire your mind? Can you literally create new neurological connections? And this is where the field of neuroplasticity is opening the door to new possibilities about how we create new neurological connections, how we learn, and how the brain takes in information. There was an interesting study done in Australia by a psychologist called Alan Richardson. And he took a basketball team and he split the team into 3. Now, the first group were allowed to physically practice popping the ball into the net to score goals. The second team were allowed no physical practice. What they were allowed was to mentally rehearse putting the ball into the net and to visualize. And the third group were allowed no physical practice and no mental rehearsal or visualization. Weeks later, the results were phenomenal. The group who were allowed to mentally rehearse and visualize popping the ball into the net were almost as good as the group who had physically practiced. So what does this show us? It shows us that we can indeed rewire those neurological connections. We can create new neurological pathways. Now, I don't want to just tell you about this. I want to give you an experience about this. So what I'd like you to do is, wherever you are, if it's possible, I'd like you to stand up. So I'm just going to put the screen back on again so you can see what I'm going to do. I'm just going to move my chair off to the side and move back so you can see me. So I may shout a bit so you can hear me a little bit more. And since I can't see any of you, I hope that you're doing this with me. What I want you to do is to stretch out your right arm. Like this, just stretch out your right arm. And then what I want you to do is I want you to take your right arm behind you. So stay facing the front, but turn your body and take your arm behind you and go as far as you can go without stretching or straining. Go as far as you can go and notice what or who you're pointing at. All right, so make sure you've gone as far as you can go. When you've done that, just come back, face the screen and take your arms down by your side. As I said, you need to be standing for this. And what I want you to do is just to close your eyes for a few moments. So wherever you are, just close your eyes. Make sure you're not peeping. And what I want you to do is I want you to imagine you're stretching your right arm out in front of you. There's no need to do it. Just imagine you're stretching your right arm out in front of you. With your eyes closed, imagine your right arm out in front of you and it going round the hands of a clock to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5, 6, effortlessly and easily imagine your arm gliding behind you. So see what you see, hear what you hear, feel what you feel, notice what you notice as you imagine your arm gliding effortlessly and easily behind you. Now imagine it going further to 7 o'clock, to 8 o'clock, maybe even to 9 o'clock, maybe even to 10 o'clock. So see what you see, Hear what you hear, feel what you feel, notice what you notice as you imagine your arm going so much further than it did before. Have you got that? Now, wherever you are, just open your eyes and notice where you're pointing. Now, when I do this, most people find that their arm has gone further than it went before. You can come back and sit down. So what does this show us? It shows us that you have nowhere near tapped into your potential. Because remember, I asked you to go as far as you could possibly go. And now most of you have found that you've gone a little further. But it also shows the power of your mind. And as I said, that you have nowhere near tapped into your potential. There is always more. So now you've experienced that we can create new neurological pathways, that we can indeed rewire the brain. So I'm just again putting up the screen. So we can create new neurological pathways. Now, speaking of pathways, how would you feel about walking across burning hot coals of about 1700 degrees Fahrenheit? Now, some of you may think, well, that sounds quite nice, because if you're in Europe, I believe it's a little bit of a freeze on at the moment. In the Middle East, it's nice and warm, so sorry about that. But one of the things I do is I teach people to walk across burning hot coals of about 1700 degrees Fahrenheit. Why, you may be asking? Do we need more fire walkers in the world? Well, the answer to that question is probably not. But what the world does need, particularly at this time, is more people who can face their fears. And I've seen the fire inspire that sort of courage in people. Now, the other reason that I run these breakthrough experiences is research shows us that by the age of 35, most people are already set in terms of how they respond, how they react, what emotions they run from, even the language that you use. You'll use a very narrow band of vocabulary. So by the age of 35, they say that we're 95% set in how we respond and react and the menu that we operate from. Now that begs the question that if you're 95% set by the age of 35, how do you ever learn anything new? And this is where experiences such as the firewalk come in, because they're what I call blow your mind experiences. And that means that you've got no programs or patterns stored at the unconscious level to know how to respond or react. It's like a clean slate. So that means when people do walk across those burning hot coals completely unharmed, it creates new, empowering neurological connections that propel them forward. And it also begs the question within individuals, if I can do that, something that I've been taught is impossible, and now I find that it's possible, what else can I do in my life? And for me, I truly believe that we are superhuman, that a lot of our abilities have been kept small, that we've been dumbed down. And so, as I said, the reason that I run these breakthrough experiences is to shift people from impossible to possible very quickly and open the door by creating new neurological connections which allow them to expand in all areas of their life. Now, I'm going to be honest, when I run these breakthrough events, it often puts people into, there's a lot of energy. It can make people feel a little bit anxious or nervous because they don't know how to respond or react. So the third key in unlocking the genius in you and igniting that spiral effect is harnessing that chaotic energy when you find yourself in these situations. And we're in chaotic energy right now with the global situation. So how do we harness that energy to create a shift, not only in ourselves, in others? And I want to talk a little here about energy. And I talk more about energy in my last book, which is called You, the Divine Genius. Now, energy is the building blocks of all matter. You are energy. If you're sitting on a chair, that's energy. Your office, your environment, it's all energy. And yet most people are not aware that we are energy. Everything in the outside world is energy. Consciousness is energy, and energy is conscious. So if you're looking at this screen, if you see the blue screen, blue is energy vibrating at a specific frequency, so it appears blue. Maybe at the bottom of the screen you can see red. That's because the energy of red operates from a different oscillation, different vibration and frequency. If you're listening to the sound of my voice, sound is energy vibrating at specific frequencies. So can you see, energy is everything that we are. It's just that we're not so aware of it these days. So let's do a little experiment to start getting you aware of the fact that you are energy oscillating at a specific frequency. And by the way, I prefer to use the word oscillation rather than vibration, but I mean something similar. So what I want you to do is just rub your hands together and really rub them vigorously together. Keep rubbing them together. Now just stop and hold them apart just slightly. And you'll probably feel the heat between your hands, but I would imagine that you can also feel your hands tingling, and it's as if there's a magnet between your hands. Can you feel that? It's amazing, isn't it? It's energy. So that gives you an idea of the energy that you're emitting all the time. Now, I want to do just another experiment here. So let me just come back to the main screen, because I want you to feel the energy that you felt between your hands. I'd like you to feel that through your whole body, because it's just such an incredible experience. And also, I'm not a big fan of people sitting down all the time. I'm sure you're watching many videos, many Zoom sessions these days, many webinars. And so it's a lot of sitting. And I know I can easily become a sort of couch potato. So again, what I'd like you to do is wherever you are, I'd like you to stand up. So again, I'm just going to move the chair aside. Now, I'll speak a little bit louder, but what I want you to do, I want us to get that feeling of energy through our whole body. So what I want you to do is just to start what I call the bounce and shake. So moving your knees up and down on your heels, shaking your arms. I know I must look absolutely ridiculous doing this. Shake your shoulders, even shake your head, but just shake your whole body out vigorously. And your legs, move around. You can move your hips like a little dance. And although this looks crazy what I'm doing, it actually comes from Qigong. If any of you do Qigong, they often, I like to call this the bounce and shake, but they often do an exercise like this to kind of like get all the energy moving through the nadis, the energy channels in your body. So it's a really good exercise. Keep shaking, don't stop. It's a really good exercise to do first thing in the morning, being scrunched up all night, to kind of like shake all your body out and let the energy move quickly and slowly and smoothly and wonderfully through your body. Now, just stop. Wherever you are, just stop. And be still. And you can probably notice all the energy moving, not just through your hands, but through your whole body now. So you can take a seat. Now you know you are pure energy. Energy that's constantly in flow and oscillating at a specific frequency. Your team, your office, your environment is in resonance with the energy that you are emitting. Remember, I talked earlier about the electromagnetic field that comes from the heart. And so you've probably had the experience maybe where you've walked into a room and you've just felt there's a kind of like odd atmosphere. You're feeling the energy. In fact, all organisms read energy. It's just as human beings, we've got a little bit lazy about tapping into our extra senses of intuition or knowing or understanding about feeling energy. So maybe you've spent some time with a person and noticed that certain people lift your energy and other people seem to vampire off you and drain your energy. It's as if they're feeding off you. Now, you know that you're oscillating and vibrating at a specific frequency. So look at your outer world. Do you like what you see or not? Because your outer world is simply in resonance with your inner world. So are you creating harmony or are you creating dissonance? Now, some of you may be thinking, well, Carol, does that mean what's going on in the world, the chaos that we're in, is my fault? Well, if you think about it, we are a collective consciousness. So the collective consciousness has brought about this great opportunity for a grand reset, for this great awakening. And it's uncomfortable. So this is where chaos comes into the equation. Chaos is disruptive and it fuels the change. So just for a moment, think about maybe time in your life when maybe you've had an emotional crash, or maybe a physical fall, or maybe a financial challenge. Your reality in some way crumbles. And when you build yourself up again, you build yourself up in a completely new way. And I'm sure many of you right at this time over the last year have seen that you have had no option except to shift and start operating yourself and your business in a completely different way. So this is where you can utilize chaos and you can utilize crisis, because crisis creates evolution, chaos creates evolution, because it shifts your energy so that you start operating from a different frequency, thereby creating a different world. It's impossible to create a difference in your outside world when you're running from the same energy. And remember, your thoughts are energy, words are energy, emotions are energy. It's all energy vibrating at a specific frequency. Now, I don't know, just to sort of share a little example with you, I don't know whether any of you have heard of the field of cymatics, but cymatics gives a demonstration of how frequency impacts matter, and we are matter. So there's a little video I often show, I haven't put it up tonight, but basically they have a metal tray and they put salt or sand on the metal tray and then they key in a frequency. And what you'll see is the salt and sand go into a mess and then all of a sudden they align with the frequency. And then if they turn the frequency up, once again, the salt or sand goes into chaos and then it suddenly aligns with the new frequency. So can you see when we create chaos in our life that it feels uncomfortable until we align and evolve with a higher frequency? And this is how you create that shift. This is by utilizing energy. Can all of you, I hope you can see the screen at the moment. Yeah. This is how you create that shift. So am I saying create chaos in your life? Well, at the moment, we don't have any choice. But this is where, as entrepreneurs, you'll know keeping the status quo doesn't allow for shifts and growth in yourself or others. That as entrepreneurs, you need to stir the pot and to open up to different ways to shift the energy and Chaos, as I said, is a disruptive fuel. It fuels the shift. It's a disruptive energy. So what happens when you start to create this shift in your energy field? Well, we go into the fourth section, which is you have the opportunity to ignite a morphogenetic field. Now, what do I mean by this? And why have I got an image of monkeys up on the screen? Well, let me digress for a moment and you'll see how it comes together. Back in the 1950s, there was an island off Japan called Koshima. And some behavioral psychologists were studying the monkeys and their behavior on this island. And every day when they went to the island, they took a big truck of sweet potatoes and emptied those sweet potatoes on the beach. Now, the monkeys loved the sweet potatoes. What they didn't enjoy was all the sand and grit that was on the sweet potatoes. Now, that was until one monkey, apparently a female monkey, but who knows? Apparently one monkey took that potato and she washed it in the sea and then she ate it. So she got rid of all the sand and grit. And I would imagine that sweet potato tasted quite nice with the sweetness of the potato and the saltiness of the sea. And she taught that washing technique to other monkeys in her family, in her tribe, who taught it to other monkeys, who taught it to other monkeys, who taught it to other monkeys, until one day, when the scientists came to the island, they found all the monkeys were doing the same. They were taking the sweet potatoes and washing them in the sea. Not only that, but a neighboring island, which was no monkey from Koshima could have swum across, they were doing exactly the same thing. How come? Well, this is the morphogenetic field that biologist and author Rupert Sheldrake talks about. And he says when individuals of a species come together, it creates a group mind. And we see examples of a group mind in nature all the time. So if any of you go scuba diving, you'll see a school of fish. And when one moves, they all move. And then if you go outside and look in the sky and you see a flock of birds, you'll see that one moves, they all move and change direction almost instantaneously. Now, can you imagine being able to do that with a group of people? That when you change, they shift. And to me, the morphogenetic field is really the manifestation of genius. And this is where you come in as the catalyst, and you've already experienced it. So remember right at the beginning, I said, what happens when you smile at another person? That's right. They smile back because you're wired that way. And even the greatest of bonfires starts with a single spark. So you have the ability not only to manifest those shifts and changes in yourself, but you also have the opportunity to ignite a morphogenetic field in others that creates a spiral effect that leads to infinite expansion. And it starts with you. So I'm going to take questions in just a moment. So if you do have any questions for me, you can type them in the chat box and I'll have a look at them. But while you prepare your questions or type them in, I just want to do a very quick review of these 4 steps again. So the first key is to discover what lies beneath the hard drive of you or your organization. In other words, discover what patterns and programs you're operating from at the unconscious level. And as you start to recognize those programs and patterns at the unconscious level, you can start to discover whether they're helping you and moving you forward or moving you in the other direction. Now, one way to start discovering those programs and patterns is to notice who or what triggers you. Now, once you know what or who triggers you, you can start redefining the triggers for you or your brand and your organization. And remember here, you are also a trigger that elicits a conditioned response in other people. So more importantly, what conditioned response do you want to elicit in other people? Is it, oh yes? And I'm sure that's what you would like to elicit in other people. So is it possible to change those conditioned responses? Is it possible to change the way those neurons wire and fire together and create new programs and patterns? And you discovered that it is with the power of the mind. So do you remember when I asked you to take your arm behind you and go as far as you could? And then I gave you a visualization for what, about 15, 20 seconds? And you all found that your arm went so much further than it did before. So now you know that you have the mental capacity to create new neurological connections once you can identify what those programs and patterns are that need to be changed. When you change, it often feels uncomfortable, but you can utilize that chaos, that crisis, that energy to shift you to a completely new level, to start operating and oscillating from a new frequency. Because when you shift, your outer world shifts. And when you shift, other people shift too. And that's when you ignite a morphogenetic field that leads to infinite expansion. You become the spark that ignites that bonfire. So, are there any questions? If you have any questions, again, sorry, let me just put that slide back. Please pop them into the chat box. So I'll just see if there's any in there. So, can you provide tangible advice with 1 or 2 examples of how to harness the energy? Good question. Again, it comes down to recognizing that you are energy. Once you recognize you are energy and that you are emitting energy, whether you know it or not, you'll know that you're impacting others. So let me give you an example. Let's say you've had a bad weekend. So when you go into the office or when you're around other people, you're in a bad mood. Now, even if you don't say anything, do you get that people just stay away from you? Of course they do, because at an unconscious level, they can feel that vibration, they can feel that energy. And this is the importance of you maintaining and managing your energy. So, Michelle, I choose not to watch mainstream media. I don't want to put that into my pie. I choose to watch videos or read information that uplifts me, that moves me to a different energy field. So I view that even when I'm out and about and walking around people, that when people spend time with me, they feel lifted and energized rather than drained. And I hope that's starting to make sense with you. So you become the energy beacon that lifts other people rather than drains other people. So I hope that made sense. And Michelle, when I did that little exercise of just, shaking your body out, and right at the beginning when I said, sit up straight, your physiology impacts how you feel. And again, most people know this is true. If you sit here like this or speak like this, if you see somebody like this, you guess they're depressed. So even when you just shift or sit up straight, that automatically changes your state. Changing your thoughts, changing the language that you use. So these are all ways that you can start to move your energy to a different level and then harness it by surrounding yourself with like-minded people, which is one of the purposes of a small world, to be involved and connected with like-minded people. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a clue of some of the ways to change. And as I said, even shaking your body out and moving your energy in your body in a different way starts to create a shift and change. One more, I think I have time for one more question from Sandy. How is it best to identify patterns or beliefs behind, okay, identifying those patterns. Okay, good. I love that question, Sandy. Remember I said, notice what or who triggers you, who pushes your buttons. Parents, brothers and sisters are always very good at pushing those buttons in you. So here's the thing. Again, your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. So let's say you see somebody who's jealous. The only reason that you can recognize jealousy in another person is because it resides within yourself. You've had an experience of it. Does that mean that you respond and react? It may not trigger you. But if somebody being jealous triggers you, then it could be a program or pattern that you want to start bringing to the surface and doing something about. Here's another example to think about that I hear a lot from people these days. I'll hear people say, Carol, I give and I give and I give and I give, and all she does is take, 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 take. Now, if you use that mirror effect and say, well, what do I recognize in the other person? They're a taker. And if you reflect that back to yourself, most of you will go, no, I'm not a taker. So sometimes you need to kind of do a little twist on this and ask yourself, so if I see that person's a taker and it's triggering me, what are they good at? They're good at receiving. Now turn that back to yourself. You're good at giving. Are you so good at receiving? Is that a program or a pattern that you need to start to embrace? So do you see how everything in the outside world that you've created is a gift? Because if it triggers you, there's something for you to learn. There could be a program or pattern that you need to bring into your awareness that may be hindering you rather than helping you. So Sandy, I hope that gives you a little clue on starting to recognize those programs, those patterns. Now, as I said, I'm conscious of the time, so just a couple of things that I want to share with you, and I'll go back to the screen that you may enjoy. And I do encourage you, it's been a short time to sort of share as much as possible. So there's more. I have recently launched an 11-day Mind Power Challenge that some of you may enjoy. It's completely free. Okay, and you can sign up for this free 11-day Mind Power Challenge at youthedivinegenius.com and go to the courses, create an account. If you have trouble creating an account, just send me an email, we'll create an account for you. So it's 11-day Mind Power Challenge. It's not long, it's not complicated, it's very simple things. It's a video or audio that's less than between 5, maximum 10 minutes each day that you can do that will start creating those shifts and changes. And if you enjoy that Mind Power Challenge, then I also have another online course which is called You, the Divine Genius. That course there's over 40 videos, inductions, meditations, exercises. There's lots for you to enjoy. I also have more free stuff on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is simply Carol Talbot. And if you go to the playlist, you'll find that during lockdown, I posted a lot of my online programs for free for people to enjoy there. You may want to take a screenshot. These are some of my websites and ways to get in contact with me, just so that you can keep in touch. I'll just go back if you missed that. So I hope you've all taken a picture of that. And then just before I finish off, I started with the story of Aladdin. And all Aladdin had to do was he found a magic lamp, and when he rubbed that magic lamp, a genie appeared and granted all his wishes. So the question is not whether there's a magic lamp that you need to find. You now know that the genie, the genius, is inside each and every one of you. And I always remember when I was at school, I heard about a magic formula called alchemy. And I don't know if any of you have heard of alchemy. It's said to take a base or a low metal, such as lead, iron, steel, and transform it into something more valuable, like gold. And I remember my maths and my science teachers saying, Carol, it's a load of rubbish. There's no magic formula to turn lead into gold. However, I found the secret to alchemy, because what I discovered was alchemy is really about making transformations inside ourselves. This is when you unlock the genius, the genie within each and every one of you. You also create a spiral effect that impacts others and leads to infinite expansion. I'd like to take this opportunity to all of you who stayed and been on this program. It's been my pleasure to share with members of A Small World. I'd also love to thank A Small World for inviting me to this webinar and to present to you all. Please reach out. I love to hear your messages, and if you've enjoyed this, so much more I'd love to share with you. And I honor that we're all busy people, so I honor your time. Wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful day, or if you're going to bed like I will be soon, then sleep well. Thank you so much.